started here. Welcome to Exploring Next Generation Education, K-12 Trends That Matter for 2021. I'm your host, Dr. Hiller Spires. I'm Executive Director of the Friday Institute and Associate Dean in the College of Education at North Carolina State University. Yes, we've had an extremely challenging year. A global pandemic, ongoing racial injustice and inequities, economic challenges for our most vulnerable, an insurrection on our nation's capital, and a presidential inauguration which signaled new beginnings for our country. Educators navigated their way through these compounded issues. They summoned their creativity and resiliency to support and engage students. With this dramatic backdrop, we're now moving further into 2021 with disappointments and frustrations combined with a hope for a brighter collective future. The goal of our panel discussion today is to surface K-12 trends that matter for 2021. What do we need to be relentless about? What do we need to let go? How do we create space for transformation that can usher in new ways of thinking about and doing education? Joining me today to address these questions and much more, we have a distinguished panel of guests. Let me introduce our guests to you now. First, Dr. Yang Zhao, Foundation Distinguished Professor, School of Education at the University of Kansas. And I also just learned he is also working at the University of Melbourne. Welcome, Yang Zhao.
Thank you.
Next, Dr. Jer Confrey. She's Joseph D. Moore Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Mathematics Education in the College of Education at North Carolina State University. Welcome, Jer.
Thanks, Hiller. Hello.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. Dr. Jessica DeQueer Gumby, who is a professor and department head of teacher education and learning sciences in the College of Education at NC State. Thank you, Jessica, for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Hiller.
And then finally, Dr. Punya Mishra, Associate Dean of Scholarship and Innovation and Professor at Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University. So thank you,
Glad to be here. Thank you, Hiller.
Yeah, thank you, Punya, for being with us. And thank you, panelists, for joining us today. I purposefully chose each one of you because I think that you have a lot to offer individually. And I think that when we start hearing what your ideas are and then start talking across panelists, I think that we're going to get some really interesting emerging ideas that can help us think thoughtfully about 2021 in education. So what I'm going to have you do is each of you will give us some of your initial thoughts. Then we will, I'll facilitate a conversation, and we'll also take some questions from the audience. So we're going to get started now. Jessica, I'm going to start with you. You've spent much of your career conducting research on critical race theory, having written a book on race and ethnicity in the study of motivation. How do you think CRT can help inform educators as they navigate racial injustice at this moment in time within our nation? And what trends matter for this upcoming year from your point of view?
Thank you for that question, Hiller. I think it's really important for us to think about the role that race plays in education. And I think so many times that we try to shy away from race because I think race is such an emotional topic, and we're just really afraid to even think about, what it means and how much it actually impacts what we do each and every day. So what I really want to talk about a lot about the trends that I see in education is that how much really race really plays and how we really should be emphasizing race, or at least looking at the roles that race plays. For instance, we need to really look at the issues that race and racism plays in schools. Let's pay more attention to it. For instance, Look at the resegregation of schools that we have. With the increase of charter schools, we're really seeing that what we're really doing with a lot of our charter schools is that we really are resegregating our schools. And with the gentrification of our neighborhoods, we continue to resegregate our schools. So that's a problem. We have the continued criminalization of our kids of color in school, with the discipline policies, not the 3 strikes you're out policies, but a lot of different policies we have with the discipline gaps we have in schools. What we're having is that we're continuing to, discipline certain groups of kids, and which is happening that we're pathologizing, particularly African American and Latinx students. We have the constant overrepresentation of students of color in the special ed programs, the constant underrepresentation of students of color and gifted programs. So that's a particular racial issue. And we still have the opportunity and achievement gaps. And then we still don't like to have racial dialogues in schools. If we look at what all has happened here in the United States with the Black Lives Matter movement, everything that's happened with all the police brutality and just all the different issues that have happened with race in the country, we know that there are racial issues going on, and kids also bring those issues into the classroom. But we can't be afraid to have those discussions in school. So we need to learn to have those racial dialogues. And so with that, we need to think about who's coming to our classrooms. We have a change in racial demographics in our classes. We have more and more students of color in our classes, yet our teaching population stays the same. The last data I actually saw was like our teaching population still is 79% white, roughly about 9% Latinx, 7% Black, 2% Asian. And so, so we need to figure out how do we get our more teachers of color in. Similar to that, we need to kind of change our approach of our teaching to maybe more reflect the students that are in our classroom and to reflect their experiences. We need to more value the experiences that our students actually bring to the classroom. We need to take in consideration the needs of our students. And our curricula should reflect the multicultural experiences that our kids actually bring to the classroom. So there are a lot of different things that actually we could do that CRT actually tells us about just the importance of race and racism. And which brings me to 2 other really important issues that I see going on that are related to race, but not as related to race. I think, one big issue that we have seen going on in the country is that people don't necessarily talk to each other anymore. And we have a problem really understanding each other. And so in schools, we need to teach empathy. We need to get students to better understand their emotions and the emotions they experience and learn how to better regulate their emotions. We need to get students to learn how to better interact with each other and to learn how to interact with people who are different, who maybe come from different racial ethnic backgrounds or different cultural backgrounds. We need to be able to interact with people different political backgrounds. So I think a lot of what we're experiencing is that people don't know how to talk with each other, just don't know how to interact, and they don't know how to regulate the emotions they experience when something is difficult or something's hard or something they don't like. So we need to really focus on social emotional learning in schools as well. And my last issue is really about in schools, we need to go back to really implementing critical thinking in our curriculum. Because I see a lot of what's going on now is a lot of misinformation is out there, but a lot of people don't have the skills to actually question what they read. They don't have the critical media literacy to kind of question what they're seeing online. And they're just taking it as fact. Particularly when they see things about groups of people they don't know or understand, or see groups of, for instance, about race or racial groups. And so, because they don't have an understanding about who they're interacting with. And so I think we need to go back to having people to ask good critical questions and really understand what they read and see. So I really think that there are a lot of different things that we can do that are really important now that are going to be really important post-pandemic once we get kids really back into the classroom. And so it's focusing on, who's in the classroom, what they're bringing to the classroom, how race is, impacting our schools and the kids individually, kind of their social emotional learning, and then getting them how to think and how we're actually teaching them to think appropriately.
Well, you got us off to a good start. That was a lot. Thank you so much. That was great. So I'm going to move on now to everybody. Remember everything that Jessica said. I'm going to move on now to Punya for some interesting opening remarks. And Punya, in your most recently published work, you argue for co-creating with children and their families a humanizing curriculum. And I think that probably has some connections with what Jessica was talking about. For those listening who might not have had the opportunity to read this, what's the key idea? And how do you recommend school-based leaders and teachers begin that process? And then also, what do you see the trends are that matter for 2021?
Thank you, Hiller, for the question. And I think that one of the things that, I mean, if you just think about what we have gone through, in a period of a month and a half or 2 months, we had 1.5 billion learners across the globe out of school. And we were suddenly part of this unprecedented sort of global experiment, without even being sort of honestly being prepared for it. And one of the things that, Zhao and I, with a couple of other people, have this conversation we have been having every Saturday called Silver Lining for Learning. And we've been doing this now for 40 plus weeks, looking at how has this transformation, what kind of impact does it have on us, and what are the positives that can emerge from it? And I think one of the things that really, a couple of things stand out. One, how proud I am of the field that I'm a part of. Because educators stepped up often with very little resources. And this is not just in the United States, this is globally. I mean, we have examples of whether it's in China or in Indonesia, where we have talked to educators and the kinds of creativity and innovation that they brought out to do the fundamental work that we have devoted our lives to, right? So that was something amazing. On the other side is organizations sort of split. I mean, this is an sort of an extreme thing, but split sort of two ways. One group of organizations sort of put their heads under the sand and said, we need instructions from up above on what we are supposed to do. While there were other organizations which were far more resilient. They said, okay, we have to pivot, we have to change. And the work that I'm involved in right now is looking at how do we design the systems that allow us to, that create more resilient systems that can weather this, because COVID is just one. We have global climate change coming up. We have AI, we have changes in the world of jobs coming up. This is going to be a very transformed world, whether we like it or not, right? So at the same time, we are seeing this global shutdown of, travel and so on. However, look at the development of the vaccine could not have been possible without these global networks, without this collaboration. So we live in this strange world, which is both connected and also split up. And absolutely along the lines that Jessica just said, I think one of the things that this COVID crisis has sort of revealed to us are the deep schisms that are within our society. And so the virus does not care whether you're black or white or green or blue, whether you're Hindu or Christian or Native American. However, the systems that we have in place, which already discriminate, make the impact of this virus far worse. If you're from a poorer community, you don't have internet access, and suddenly you are blocked from learning. So I think those are deeper fundamental issues that we have to sort of think about. But I think the biggest thing that I would like us to take away, and this has been something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I'll come to the humanizing curriculum bit, that all of this stuff, the school systems, 50-minute periods that you sit in one room and then you go to another room to learn something else, certificates, universities, all of this stuff is made up. We made this stuff up. Like it's not a natural thing like a rock or a cloud or a tree. It's stuff that we made up. And one quote that I would like to share is from the philosopher Andrew Scott. And he said that the 20th century created the ideas of teenagers and retirement. And I remember reading that, or listening to him say this, and I'm like, that's bizarre. Like people have always turned from 12 to 13. However, the idea of a teenager is a function of social change, is a function of a group of people having more money or having cars and, of high schools and of culture. So that was something that was created in the 20th century. It didn't exist before. Same idea, the idea of retirement was first started in Germany back in 1890s. So I just thought about that and my brain just literally exploded. And what it told me is these systems that we have created for education right now are inherently problematic for a variety of reasons. Children are learning machines, and what we have done is we have created the systems which are based on punishment and shame and fear. We have created systems which make people go through educational system lockstep as if linear, rigid sort of curricula. And so this is where I think the idea of the humanizing curriculum comes in, is like, how do we put learners at the center? If we think about what we have done, we have created this buildings called schools, and we say you go there for so many hours a day and learning happens. Then over summer, you're off for some time. Like, why did we make that up? And so I think what this COVID-19 has done is allowed us to ask questions of certain fundamental assumptions that we have made. And without bringing communities and parents into the conversation, without respecting the history and culture that our students are bringing into the classroom, we cannot create classrooms and learning systems which are respectful, which honor these students for the energy, the passion, and the potential that they have. And so I think the biggest thing that this COVID-19 has done is maybe allowed us to question these assumptions, to unpack them. And we have this distinction that we make between online learning and face-to-face learning, and you have this whole push happening now. Oh, we need to go back to schools. Can we just call this thing learning? And think about ways that online works for certain things and face-to-face works for certain things. We live, one of the episodes that, for Silver Lining, we had the students from Nepal. And I really recommend people to go to silverlining.forlearning.org and find that episode. These were kids who joined these MOOCs to learn English. And suddenly we have this 13-year-old girl who gets interested in astronomy. And through these MOOCs, she has an opportunity to go and learn that. We had this other girl who got interested in medieval literature and science fiction. And so the opportunities that we have to cross these boundaries. So Young and I sort of share this vision of learning being driven by the passions and interests of the learner. However, that cannot happen until we design the right systems, until we design systems which are resilient, systems which always put students at the center. And my hope, and this is not saying that this is going to happen in 2021, but my hope is that we are going to get into these conversations of critical thinking, data literacy. How do you deal with fake news? These are one of the more dangerous things, if I would say so, that has happened over the past 10, 11 months is now these large multinational companies have data streams on every one of our children because they were on Zoom, they were on Google Classroom, they were on this. What are the ethical and moral responsibilities of education leaders to think about what the impact of these data streams are on these kids going forward? I think these are very, very important questions around values, around principles, around questioning fundamental assumptions. That's really important. And I think that the role of imagination is critically important. So we had a guest a couple of weeks ago who talked about the fact that when the US went to the moon, at some level they were prepared for that by having read a bunch of science fiction, which made those realities at least real in our heads. And then we could go and actually do that. And so what are the kind of speculative ways that we can think in positive ways about the future of education? So I'm just making a plug for something that's going to start this weekend. We have a bunch of science fiction writers who are writing stories about the futures of learning. The first one of them is going to come out in Slate magazine this Saturday. And then we have an educator who's going to give a response to that. And then we are bringing a webinar. So we will do this over the next 3 months. I really recommend people to go and look at that because it allows us to think about education in new and different ways. For too long, we have made it this box, this building where you go in and then you come out and that's where learning happens. I think if anything, COVID has told us that learning can happen anywhere. It can be done well. However, we need systems, resources to support that. And always to keep the learner and their impulses, their passions, their interests at the center, because that's what we need for the future. I could go on and on, but I will pause here, Hiller, and let others speak as well.
Thank you. I like your phrase, children are learning machines, and sometimes we just need to get out of the way. So I want to go now to Jer. Jer, you're known for research on learning trajectories, and you've worked in that area for many years and in the area of assessment in mathematics. But you also like to think about the big picture of education. So can you share your ideas about the issues that matter in 2021 from your perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Hiller. Thank you also to the other panelists. It's been really interesting. So I posed myself the following question, which I have been spending a lot of time thinking and worrying about, and that is, what's the role of education in what people are calling a post-truth society? And the simple answer always is the one that says education is going to fix everything. But I think this is a very different situation, and we have to think really hard how to deal with it. It's particularly difficult when we have reports like from the New York Times of a QAnon supporter who says her judgment is based on getting goosebumps due to the titillation of a new rumor. And that's what we face in terms of the issues around reasoning or lack of it out there. So I would say we can only solve this in education to the degree to which we can grab and hold the attention of students. We're finding it very difficult during COVID. We're just access and distribution of access is uneven. McKinsey's predicting that all students are going to be 7 months behind, Black students 10 months behind, and poor students a year behind when we come out of COVID. So how are we going to grab and hold their attention? And I'm a STEM person, so I'm reaching in that direction. So I want to just first off say there's been a bright spot in the last year, and that's science. During the year, we've witnessed steady progress and some really important insights and accomplishments related to COVID. And in particular, of course, the vaccine. And when you look at that history, it's fascinating because I think it can help us think about these questions. Messenger RNA work started 3 decades ago. The idea was to tweak the synthetic mRNA to make the immune system respond and fight off COVID without fighting off the mRNA. And by the way, the woman who started working on that, her name was Katalin Krako. She pursued the idea on her own. She got denied tons of grants, and she just kept at it. She got a demotion at the University of Pennsylvania, and she just kept working at it and was ready and needed a pandemic, sadly, to test out her theories. And basically, in 4 months, produced a vaccine, tested it in 7 months, showed it to be 95% effective, and released it in 9 months. That's astounding. So one of the things I would say is we have a really important story that we need to share with our kids, and we need to share it as a success story that helps invite kids into science, and they can be invited in through movies and other things. So in the midst of the kind of crazy stuff that we're reporting all the time about what the administration did and did wrong, and all the ways, the tragic ways that they've cost lives, I think it's really important to think about the question of how do we engage kids in science and help them to understand what's really possible. Also, along with that, we saw amazing work in data, in the predictions that were made in tracking the virus and figuring out what kinds of things to track. And the point here I want to say is that they were also figuring out how to make models of the spread of COVID. And modeling is such an important activity because those models matter. They make a difference. I think over the last year, probably one of the most important things we saw was early on when we saw that representation that was called, that was the notion of flattening the curve. All of a sudden, everybody saw that notion and had to figure out what does it mean to flatten the curve and how do we do that so we don't overwhelm the system. So point there is, I think it's really important that we build on that success. It also leads to my next 2 points, which is the key to education lies in making progress in engagement and in the provision of solid and informative data. In terms of engagement, together with Dr. Aaron Krupa and Michael Belcher at NCSU and also Jason Learning, we built 9 entrepreneurial challenges for middle grade students, which invite them into STEM and to be inventors and solutions to problems. I had the pleasure last week to actually judge one of those competitions called Flashy Fashion, where the students were challenged to create an LED-based fashion that was programmable and that would use a coordinate plane. And the winning entry there was a group that created a set of 9, a mask that could have LEDs in it that would show 9 different expressions. And you could just click on your little button and change your expression as you're walking along in a mask. We really need more of that kind of creativity and excitement and having kids feel like this is something they can do. But But to invent solution, you have to have ideas. And the ideas require building up a systematic knowledge. And so next point I want to just make is I'm seeing out there a backing off of assessment. Now, I have no problem with backing off high stakes assessment, in particular during a time when anything that came out of those assessments would be more about opportunity to learn than it would be about what kids know and how they've worked. But assessment's not just accountability, it's feedback. And students need to know where they stand, and they need to know if they're making steady progress along to the big ideas that they're coming to. They need a chance to participate in goal setting and setting progress towards those goals. And we're failing them because we haven't developed the right kind of tools. We have a lot of teachers using formative assessment. Often the formative assessment is a single item and they get feedback on it, and that's great and involves students, but it doesn't tell you where they are in the long run and make sure that they are where they need to go. People are also moving towards interim assessments, and once again, the interim assessments are just mini high stakes assessments, and they often end up poorly coordinated with curriculum in such a way that it doesn't really help. So way back in 1989, Wiggins called for authentic assessments that do not lose sight of the learner. And that, I think, goes back to what Punya's been saying about do not lose sight of the learner. So one of the things I just want to mention about that is we've built a tool called Math Mapper. It's for grades 6 through 8, and it's built around learning trajectories, as Hiller said. Learning trajectories are descriptions of what we know from the research on kids' thinking, of how they go from sort of unsophisticated thinking to more sophisticated thinking. Teachers don't have access to that information in a systematic way. They certainly have experience with kids in classrooms. So one of the things we've done is build out a diagnostic measure that includes testing, retesting, and practicing, so the kids can actually track their progress along towards big ideas and be involved in that assessment process. We have to be giving kids at least detailed feedback that's at least as good as the feedback I get from my Peloton or other people get from going to the gym, so that you can actually see your progress as you move along. Kids and parents must know if they're making steady progress to these big ideas and should have confidence in the measure. So I just sort of hit on 3 things. One, let's make a big deal about the success in science and tell those stories. And often media doesn't, because the people doing the media don't know enough science to tell the story in enough detail to really help kids see what a cool and interesting story it is. Let's strengthen our attention to engagement, and particularly engagement which involves the creative and motivated participation by students. And finally, let's make sure we have we create relevant data systems that can gauge their progress towards essential big ideas along based on proven learning patterns. Thanks.
Thank you, Jer. I like your idea about, it's almost like we can use the current situation as a global object lesson in science, specifically the creation of the vaccine. You know, if people really focus on and get inside of how that process worked, I mean, it's this huge global object lesson for all of the world, for kids too. So thank you very much. So now I'm going to move to Yang. Yang, in your recent book, in teaching students to become self-determined learners, you and your co-author make a case for self-determined learning. Tell us how you define self-determined learning and why it's needed in our schools, along with your ideas for 2021.
Thanks, Heather. It's kind of fascinating that to listen to all the conversations here. So I want to make sure I don't offend anybody. So whatever you guys said, I agree with you, but I don't. So anyway, that's we'll start with that. Okay. So there are several things.
Yang, I should have told everybody that you're going to offend us. I should have done that in my introduction, so I forgot to say that.
Thank you.
Be prepared.
All right. So
okay.
First thing actually I want to share with you is I just wrote an article about this, is about this learning loss. You know, learning loss. There's a lot of guesses about how much they have learned, how much they've done this. We've lost more in math and less in reading and all those things. It's a very dangerous discourse. A pandemic like this is like a war. kids will lose. So what I worry about is the invitation of standardized testing back to pretend to measure what have you lost. There's a lot of call for government to do this, to say, oh, I want to know who has lost more, who have lost less. It's a meaningless task. This pandemic is unequal pandemic. Our poor kids of some groups have been hurt more. This is like no child left behind. If we did testing again to say, basically you're gonna hurt the poor kids a lot more. So my first thing is that I will invite all of our teachers to meet where kids are. We also should look at the possible gains out of this pandemic. They have gained more independence, hopefully. They have gained more resilience. They have learned to be more creative to deal with this. Maybe not going to schools has helped some children to learn to interact online, to form communities online. So let's look at some positive things. No testing. Don't be obsessed with the so-called learning loss. It happens. And Pune, I love what you said about teenagers being a manufactured concept. By the way, teenagers don't exist in China, for example. We don't have teens in our language, in the Chinese language. It doesn't exist in most other countries that don't speak English. So the same idea is the curriculum. The curriculum is a manufactured, mostly man-made. Maybe women did some contribution, but it had been man-made for a long time. And that concept, we are learning loss. If you hadn't gained anything, how can you lose something? The loss is really basically defined by this thing called curriculum. I've been talking to parents, well, my kids are going to lose. They say, lose from what? So that is really important. Learning is individualized. Every student creates their own learning pathways. Our schools have been hurting our kids for that reason. So let's look at a pandemic. Actually, it's interesting. By the way, I think whatever this mess we're in is not just pandemic. It is how education has failed. Education has failed to teach our kids to work together, to teach our children to be human beings. That's what I've been, when I think Jessica were talking about social emotional learning, my view is not to teach more, but it's to teach less. It's very important. Our schools have been hurting our children. And now actually I wrote an article in the campaign about the social economical learning war. That is, in schools, yes, whenever we have some, by the way, Punya, this is in the article I'm writing for your book, for the creativity book, is that education has this bad habit to say, whenever we think something is important, we say, let's teach it. Whenever we want to teach it, we put into standards. Whenever we have standards, we assess it. And then we kind of destroy the whole thing. Social emotional learning, our children are happy. They don't have time to interact with people as a community, as groups. It's because our teaching has taken over everything in our kids' life. There's no time and no place for children to exercise their right to self-determination, to self-regulation, to develop themselves as an owner of their own learning. So which goes to the third point, which Punya was talking about. I think the COVID has done another thing that's amazing. Parents, not all parents, some parents have taken actions to recreate schools. You have this pandemic pods. Kids are reorganizing themselves. Kids are online. The website I can put out silver lining for learning. I just put on the chat. Punya mentioned we had kids from so many different countries doing different things. They can learn globally. So let me just end this. What I mean is that, number one, do not be obsessed with something that we never gained, that's been lost. We need to meet where children are and look at something that's amazing. Second, children need more time, more space to drive their own learning. They are the owners of their learning, not teachers. When we talk about, children are learning machines, but teachers should not be the teaching machine. We are the human educator. We're not a teaching machine. We can help learn. So children need space, needs time to learn to manage. And third of all, we cannot move away from what we've done, online and remote learning. In COVID, we all learned that. But when you are remote and online, that's global. And also for teachers, we do not have to teach every child everything. If you have 25 kids, 5 of them may be doing online, other 5 may be doing this project based, another 10 might want to work with you. We need to rethink about students as owners of their own learning. They drive that, and also students are our partners in education reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang. I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. So what would you say to folks who say, well, that sounds great, Yang, but what about the kids who aren't self-motivated and who do need extra support? How do we design that within the system you're talking about?
Well, Heather, actually, I don't agree. I think every student is self-interested in something. I've been actually challenging the idea to say, okay, motivational theory in psychology is probably useless. And because we're basically, because you manufacture something, kids are not interested in, you trick them to be interested in something. That's called motivational theory. I think every child in every race, in every context is interested in something. We may not have valued that something, we may not have discovered that something, but that something exists. So our teaching should be strength-based and starting with that something. We start with that something. I'm hoping, when I actually was talking to a bunch of schools yesterday, to say, if a school can help every child to find that something they're interested in, and they use that something to become better, and then they create value for others based on something, they will learn well. So my view is that, we can create a lot of, curriculum, but we need to create space for children to discover. Human beings, teachers, I hope will remove ourselves from competing with Google or with YouTube to teach. We don't instruct, we provide feedback, we organize them, we become personal consultants. We work with every student. When they are the learning machine, we are the human educator, and this not become a teaching machine. So that's something exists.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Yeah, go
Hiller,
ahead.
if I can just drop in a comment here. I mean, I'm sorry I use the phrase learning machines, because there is a mechanistic sort of a connotation to that. But we have to realize that children are designed evolutionarily and biologically to play, to explore, to take initiative, to discover, to pursue their own interest. That is who we are as a species. And I think what we have done, and I think Young is very right in pointing that out, is that we have said, oh, you've got to go and do X or Y. And then we say, oh, why aren't they engaged or motivated? And I think that flipping that equation to recognize the inherent potential. I mean, this goes back to John Dewey when he talks about the primary impulses that children have. And I think that works for adults as well. And he talks of 4. He says it's inquiry. We get a jolt of dopamine when we understand something. It's like, oh, aha, this is how gravity works, or this is what iambic pentameter is. There's inquiry. There is construction. We like to build things. We like to communicate and interact with each other. And finally, whatever we do, we bring our own self into it. There's this act of expression. And I think that those 4 impulses is what that's the underlying power of what the learner brings to the table. And it plays itself out in different ways. And I think we need to recognize that.
Okay, great. I think we got a good conversation going here. Jer, I'm going to let you ask your question straight out. You put it in the chat, but go ahead and bring your point up.
Well, I mean, I think I want to just go back and do something a little bit different, which is to say, there is certainly the research that the learning trajectories are based on is research watching kids do interesting and challenging tasks that they are deeply involved in, such as your example around gravity. This is not just simply saying, here's a standard, teach to a standard. And then I think the other thing I would say is the idea that you kind of throw out a phrase like, well, we need to start where the kids are at. Well, I'm sorry, but how do you know where the kids are at? And you're going to have to find out where they're at in order to make sure that you're actually helping them gain the strength and the understanding that they need around those different kinds of ideas. So I think what you're saying is compelling in terms of I am a huge believer in the creativity of kids. I work with them in the kinds of ways you're describing all the time. But my question is, tell me how you're operating school. I mean, you're talking about a school that, frankly, I don't think exists, or maybe exists in very small numbers, and certainly has not gone to scale anywhere. So how do you get the coordination between schools, and how do you make sure if kids are moving schools that they're likely to be able to build on what they learned in order to get to more complex ideas?
Thanks, Chair. I guess you're asking me. I guess I think the first thing is that how do you know where kids are? I think that's by teachers. I really don't believe any standardized testing can reach the kids, individual children, where they are. It's that we've done that. Look at even the NAEP has trying to do this. George Bush has trying to do that. If you analyze North Carolina's data, I don't think any of those standardized testing has helped. I think individual teachers should be given more time. They can have conversations, and they always know where they are. Second thing, the schools I described, first of all, how do you manage a school like that? I think that's an adult perspective. We'll think about managing a school first as more important than learning. And schools were built to serve learning. If they don't exist, we need to create some. And I actually happen to have seen a bunch of schools like that in different countries. I've also designed schools like that. If you're interested in, we wrote a book actually about 2019. It's called An Education Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. We were not talking about COVID. But people thought we were writing about the COVID. I said, no. We were writing the old crisis of education, not serving all children, not creating the future. In that book, we had examples of students creating their own schools. We have teachers creating school within a school. We had schools in traditionally very well-to-do big schools recreating themselves. We had also very broken schools reinvent themselves. So that I don't have time to explain all of this, but it's possible. It has been done. However, I would like to say it has not become the mainstream. But I'm hoping COVID might have shocked us enough to reinvent our schools. May not even be reinvent our schools. Actually, we might lose a lot of students. Maybe 10% of kids are not coming back to our schools. And maybe they are already reinventing online courses. There's actually another school. Pune, I remember we had the Global Online Academy, which is an interesting organization. That organization has several hundred schools, started with 10 or 20 schools. Then there are students from different countries, different schools can take courses online together, and they're recreating a lot of things. So what I mean, when Heather asked me to come here, I said, okay, this is great. We're gonna have a great group of people to chat to say, how can we reinvent our schools? I'm not trying to about protecting the schools. I'm really thinking about if we can break a little bit of a school, that'd be great. If you can serve 5 kids, that's bad, that's good. One by one, hopefully we'll move to some big changes. And Pune and I were trying to write a book together about from a system, how do you involve students as co-designers of learning systems?
So I think that what I'm hearing is we definitely want to try to think about the kind of redesigns and reorientations that we need to invest in. And I think the tension a lot of times comes in a couple of ways. One, as we do this, which I think everybody on this panel, myself included, obviously we want to do that. I mean, that's what being an educator is in the today is a reimagining and trying to think of what school can be like. But I think the tensions, and I think Jer has commented on it and has surfaced, is how do we do it so that we can scale it up? And it's multiple scale ups. So it's not going to be the one size fits all. So it's multiple scale ups. But how do we do that at scale, knowing we have many, many different models? And as we do that, how do we make sure that we have a system for all learners? I mean, just like the system we have now doesn't really help all learners. We don't want to create multiple systems and then see that we lose more people. So I think that's the tension. And I think that's really the question that, I hope that we can keep talking about it and try to figure out if we can fill in fill in some of the blanks and connect some of the dots to be able to figure that out. I wanted to see what Jessica thought, because Jessica, I don't know if it was Young or Punya said something about, I think it was Young said something about motivation is not that helpful. Motivation theory is not that helpful. So I want to give you a chance to say what you need to say about that, because I know you do study motivation. And do you have any thoughts?
Well, as an educational psychologist, I was like, oh, let me bite my tongue on a couple of these things. Because, I think assessment is important. It's important how you use the assessments. I believe in diagnostic assessments. You kind of get a baseline, but then it's kind of how you can construct those assessments. Then of course, as Jared was saying, how you use those assessments. But I think in schools, we construct them. I have a lot of questions on how you construct them. There's a lot of cultural bias there, and then definitely how we use them. We go overboard with our assessments. And I definitely understand his point about motivation in terms of, we have all this motivation theory, but we don't always apply it correctly. And I think about interest. Like my son, he has specific interests in school. For instance, he's interested in geography. He's interested in climate science and all these different things. But they rarely talk about those things in school. And so, but then the things they talk about, he could maybe care less about some of that stuff. And so he's not as involved. And so it's not that motivation theories aren't important. It's just that the way we necessarily use them in school, I don't necessarily think we get the gains we want to see. But I did want to add something. I think we do have pockets of schools around here that do some of the things that Young is talking about. My son goes to Lakewood Montessori Middle School in Durham, and they do a lot of stuff where they really are trying to focus on the student and the student's autonomy, self-regulation, and different things like that, and developing students' interests. They have a lot of soul time building each day, so students could actually engage in things that are of interest to them and building their motivation, different things like that. But what's really interesting, we're one of the only public Montessori schools, I want to say in the state. And so there are very few middle Montessori schools in the country. So once again, it gets to that scalability issue that Jared talks about. So Montessori, has a, is really known for really letting kids kind of work on their own time and build their own interests, but yet we don't see a lot of Montessori schools, for instance. And so I think we have pockets of schools that do well, but we don't necessarily have the we're not able to scale up. So I think there are some good models out there, but then we have to have this will to do it. And we've talked to, my husband and I, we love the school. We've talked to the parent, talked to the principal, like, why aren't more parents interested in school? Because the schools were fairly small. And they say a lot of parents in the district don't really want more of a traditional schooling for their kids. And so some of it is a lot of people are content with kind of the standard traditional, just send your kids, you kind of sit down, sit in your classroom and, teacher standing at the board, that's it. So a lot of parents, we have to change their mindset about what is school, how is schooling supposed to be done, because they want their kids to go to school the way they went to school. So, so in order for us to kind of change the way we see schooling, we're going to have to change parents and adults' mindsets about what they see as schooling. Think about all the pushback we've got about mathematics and about how we teach mathematics. Well, just because parents were taught mathematics a certain way, they feel that their kids shouldn't be taught differently, right? So we're going to have to do a lot to educate parents about that, there can be different models of schooling. And that just because they went to school a certain way doesn't mean their children and their grandchildren should go to school the same way.
Yeah.
Jessica, if I can jump in there, I love what you were talking about. First of all, Montessori is great. There's so many different models now, different models, things. And so about scale, I really have, I've been asked a lot by say, how can the school policy change? How can the system change? I will tell you, the systems doesn't change. So we need to, for education innovations, we have to rely on individual parents, students, and teachers and schools. Systems are designed to be stable. They will react to change. They will not lead changes. So that's basically this. I think that's something that we need to accept that, we have to do this. The second thing is that we are in a really interesting time that we can recreate new learning organizations. And I've been working with some homeschooling people. They are offering very fascinating, specific project-based learning. So parents now are I'm signing on with this organization for this one thing. I'm doing this with other thing. I have my local community. It's a very different way of thinking. And I think the other piece, which is, I just want to bring Punya in this, is that we are really global. I don't see our teachers in the US trying to go global yet. You know, all our teaching, well, Heather, you've been doing this a lot. We are today truly global. We really can interact globally, and we can form global project teams, global ideas. I think that's something Donald Trump, you may not want to mention his name again, has really put America in a tough position, anti-global. But we live in the age of globalization. Our children have to become more globally minded, whatever they do. And today is the right time to do that. Every day they can do that.
My son's school actually had a global connections program, and they were connected with kids in China. So, and he was part of that program, and he really enjoyed it. So I think there are schools trying to do some of that, and and I'm definitely supporting my son's school. But I think there are pockets of it, and you're right. It's very easy, especially when everyone being online. They can easily connect with kids all around the world. It's really simple now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We're going to run out of time here in a minute, but I did want to just open it up for a couple of minutes. I don't think we can have this conversation without talking about technology. Obviously, we have so much remote learning going on now, and we didn't really get into the topic of the students who don't have technology, those students who don't have the broadband, students who don't have the devices. So we know that the pandemic has surfaced that and really put it in front of our faces. And so it'll be interesting to see if we are able to make these changes so that people have broadband and that is at scale. But I wanted just to see if a couple of you might talk about the role of educational technology within this reimagining schools. Obviously, access is important, but things like artificial intelligence, even blockchain, big data, learning analytics, all the things that we hear about all the time, and there's constant churn about it. But what's the bottom line on that? I mean, is it really going to take off for K-12 education? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I just did an interview with a journalist about emotional technology, artificial intelligence, and big data. How do you capture this? And my answer was that they can be very useful for some specific tasks, but they are not very useful for helping education. So in education, we need to define, you have educational outcomes, you have instructional outcomes. In education, we always measure instructional outcomes. What we teach you every term, we teach you every week, we measure that. But the bigger picture is called educational outcome, is curiosity, creativity, ethics, morality, the general growth of a person. That takes much longer to measure. We seldom measure that. So, when you bring in like emotional technology to capture your eyes, are you paying attention? First of all, the algorithm is not very good. And, and people have very different reactions. But overall, if you want, the so-called computerized, personalized learning systems may be able to teach you some math or some literacy, but it does not help you grow necessarily as a human being. So that's where my view is.
So if I can just follow up on that, I mean, we hear a lot about that these technologies will allow for personalized learning. And I think that Zhao makes a very important distinction. There are two ways of thinking about personalized learning. One way of thinking about personalized learning is that, we need them to understand these concepts in math. And here is a software system which has sort of cognitively or, through research mapped out all the kinds of errors students make. And we will, just like the GREs, move the difficulty of the question up and down, give them attempts to practice. Yes, that is one kind of personalized learning, but that's not genuine personalized learning. Genuine personalized learning is on the person. And so you have to understand the person. They may not want to. One of the things I love is the stories of the first sort of personalized system out of University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign called Plato, many, many years ago. Zhao and I both graduated from there, from UIUC. And one of the things that the people who were studying students using the Plato system found that students were using a lot of creativity to hack the system. Like, how do I figure out what the algorithm? And I was like, this is amazing. This is actually super interesting. But that was not something that designers of Plato, they were like, how do we stop people from doing it? And my response is, oh no, this is actually awesome, because now they are trying hard to figure out what the systems are behind that is allowing these questions to pop up and not those. And how do we, that to me that's personalization. They took something and made it their own. And I think that we really have to be very careful, because the companies who are selling the AI systems, who are selling these technologies, are going to put the label of personalized on it. And we have to be very, very careful that that is not genuine personalization. Genuine personalization puts the learner at the center. This doesn't necessarily do that.
And I wanted to let Jer have the last word here. Go ahead, Jer.
I want to totally agree with that point. And one of the things I think is useful is to make a distinction between individualized and personalized. So individualized, we have to be very careful, because a lot of the people who do the high technology, Bill Gates models often are this way. They tend to be towards let every student work by themselves, and they just keep doing these little skills and build up their skills little by little. And I'm really glad that you're arguing that personalized needs to mean connected to the interests of the person, connected to what they've done in the past, and allowing people to move forward in what they do in the future. So I do think we need to make a distinction. And I know in terms of last word, I'm really glad, Hiller, that you've been able to characterize some of this discussion around scalability and meeting the needs, the creative needs and personal needs of kids, and Jessica's emphasis for all of us on making sure that opportunities are shared and all kids have opportunities to excel. I think it's that combination of things that is going to help us move forward over the next few years.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I think, we've learned a lot today. I think all of you have passion about this topic. And I think as educators, we're all trying to figure out and reimagine what school can be. And I think going forward, there are going to be multiple models, and we're going to learn more about what works and what doesn't work. But I feel like, I don't know if we've answered the question, but I feel like we definitely have a question that we can leave ourselves with. And the one for me is, what are the kind of redesigns or reorientations that we need to invest in to ensure that we teach all learners with equal vigor and commitment? And so I'm going to stop it right there. And I want to thank you all for your insights, your passion, and I appreciate all of the energy that you put into our conversation today. We will have this video so folks can look at the video when we finish up today. Please take care, and everybody stay safe. And thank you again for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Gotta go to another meeting.